Good morning to all of you. Myself Dr.T. KUMAR, Professor of Civil Engineering Department, KSRM College of Engineering, Kadapa. My area of specialization is Water Resource Engineering. Today I want to discuss a topic on studies on integrated watershed management, a case study. Before going for this discussion, I want to discuss briefly about the outline of water resource engineering and importance and its the structures. Everybody they know the water resource, the management, the importance. So now I want to discuss briefly about the water importance as well as the different structures we have to use to conserve the water. So nowadays the water the quantity, the quality as well as the availability are the major parameters to decide the survival of the mankind. So nowadays the water remains a vital resource in the sustainable civilization. For sustainable development, we have to protect our environment and protect our the soil and air. So any sustainable development, what is sustainable development? Whatever the resources are nowadays exhausted, there is no the resources for future the generation. So whenever the resources are utilized present generation and the future generation, then only it is called as a sustainable development. So that is why the water, the major issues like because of imbalance of the water between the demand and availability, and the water is not uniformly fall. And one more thing is not uniformly the distributed. These are the main three the factors are the dominating in the case of the sustainable civilization. Main issues regarding the water is the quantity, next quality, and one more is the demand versus availability. So one thing you remember, in the case of the quantity, so our country is having the quantity is available, but whereas the quantity is not utilized. So at the same time, not only the quantity, the quality is also very important. So if you see in different states like Tamil Nadu or in Maharashtra, the quantity is available, but that quantity of water is not suitable for the drinking purpose because it is the salt water, and that is why the quality of water is very important for not only for drinking purpose, and also it is suitable for the construction the purpose. When the water is not the suitable, then that water is not waste. So that is why quantity as well as the quality are both are very important. And one more thing is the demand and availability. In the demand wise, because our India, the more demand is there because of the population growth, and one more is the more than 70 to 80% of the people are depending on the agriculture the sector. So that is why these are the three important the issues: the quantity, next quality, as well as demand and the availability. Next you see in the case of the world, the water, the total the water availability. So that means the 1/3 is a salt water. In the world wise, if you see in the case of 97, you see in the statistics or in the diagram, like 97.5% of water is a salt water, and whereas 2.5% is the fresh water. So in the side you see how much the percentage of variation. In the case of 0.3% of water is available in the lakes and ponds and the river, and 30.8% is the groundwater, and 69.9% is glaciers or in the case of snow cover like that. So this is the statistics of the global water available, both the salt and the fresh water. You imagine the fresh water is a only the 5%. So based on all the requirements you had to satisfy, and then that water you had to use for the drinking the purpose. Next, coming to the world water the cycle. So in the water cycle, as the civil engineer, you must know the water the cycle, or it is also called as a hydrological cycle. So hydrological cycle means hydro means it is in a water. So in the hydrological cycle means the water, that means it is a branch of science. In the science you have to know the occurrence, next the distribution and the movement of the water. In the hydrological cycle, if you see in the diagram, like what are the main important the components of hydrological cycle. In the coming to the components of hydrological cycle, first it is an evaporation, next afterwards it is precipitation, and afterwards infiltration. Then after satisfying all the requirements, then the runoff is whatever the amount is available on the surface is called as the runoff. You see how much the percentage, you see in the case of in the diagram. So, like evaporation. What is evaporation? Evaporation means is nothing but the escaping of molecules from the water bodies is called as evaporation. And next Evopo Transpiration. What is an Evopo Transpiration? The molecules, water molecules are escaping from water bodies as well as from the plants, it is called as Evopo Transpiration. Next coming to the precipitation. The precipitation is one of the important the parameter in the case of hydrological cycle. So, in the precipitation, different forms of the precipitation means like a rainfall or a snow or a hail or a drizzle, like that it depends upon the climatic conditions, the rainfall is fall, it is nothing but a precipitation. Next coming to the like a runoff. So, all the satisfaction of all these things, that means infiltration. So, first when water is fall in the area, you see the 79% of the rainfall on the ocean, and then once if the rainfall on the ocean, then afterwards the next step is a precipitation. Then after satisfying all the requirements, then whatever the amount is infiltrated in the ground, then after infiltration, then it will go for a percolation. From the percolation, the groundwater table may be the increases. So, as a civil engineer, everybody they had to know what is hydrological cycle, what are the components of hydrological cycle, and what is the main engineering significance of this each the component. If you know all these things, suppose if you want to construct any irrigation structure or any hydrological structure, everybody they had to know the precipitation details. If you know the precipitation, then you can estimate how much the runoff will fall on the catchment area. Once if you know the runoff, then you can decide which type of structure you have to construct and to conserve the water. Next coming to the distribution of world water, this is a major important one. The water is not distributed equally. One side, one area it is the dry rivers, and one area is a flood area. So, what is the actually this is the condition. So, you see in our country or in developed countries as well as in the developing countries, the major problem is so some areas they may not get any rainfalls, they are called as the dry areas, they are called as the drought prone areas, and whereas another areas the more water, that means they are called the flood areas. That is why in our topic in the studies on integrated watershed management, particularly this topic is in the case of drought prone area to eradicate the drought. So, because of the water is not distributed equally, one place the more water is available, more rain, surplus water is available, and in some areas there is a scarcity of the water. You see in the diagram, like in India, what is the situation? Is it in a dry condition? Whereas in the case of the China, they face the more the flood. Because why I am taking these two cases? Because in the world wise, the population is more in the case of India, and the population is more in the China. That is why they are facing the more problem regarding this the water problem. Coming to the groundwater table, groundwater availability. Already in the previous the topic in the hydrological cycle, after infiltration, next percolation, then the groundwater table may be increases. Actually, the main source in the water in the olden years, like there are two sources, like the surface sources as well as these groundwater sources. In the previously, everybody they go for a groundwater because the water is available even in the 50 feet or like a 30 feet, the water is available. But now the condition is different because all the groundwater resources are exhausted. Everybody they use the motors and the pumps. Now we see, I will take one important the developed area in our India is Gujarat state. The Gujarat is an industrial sector wise, it is the number one the state. But whereas if you see, once you go for the borehole, like in the groundwater, so they may not, if you dig in the ground, they may not, the water is available, even they go for a 1200 the feet. That is the situation of the country, because all the resources are exhausted. So there is no question of the resources for future generation. That is why everybody, our country, our Prime Minister, they are concentrating sustainable. When you will get the sustainable development, whatever the resources are utilized for present generation and the future generation is called as a sustainable development. So this is the situation. That is why everybody, it is not the responsibility of only the government people, everybody responsibility to improve the water resources, to utilize effectively the water resources. In India or China, the population is very rapidly the increases. This is the major problem. The two important problems, the water resources are not effectively utilized in these two countries because of the population growth. If you see how the population in the diagram, you see the projection, if you take from 1950 to 2050, rapidly the population is increases, and once the population is increases, whatever the resources availability is very less, that resources are not satisfied the people. That is why everybody, so you see in the case of developed countries like America or Singapore, Japan, they may not have that problem because the population is less. That is why those countries, they are investing the crores of rupees for industrial sector, but whereas in India, they are using to construct the more structures, irrigation structures to conserve the water. So you see a perspective domestic water requirements. So I taken a imagine, I assumed that how much water is required. Actually, for a person per day is required 135 liters according to the World Health Organization. Suppose if you take a small amount, if you calculate how much 4.281 gallons per person per year. So that means only in my perception, if you take 50 liters per day of water, you must require this much of water. But nowadays, rapidly the population is increases, and the luxuries of the people is increases, and the water utilization is also the increases. Nowadays, you see, if you go for a developed countries in America, they are using for a person per day is 200 liters per person per day. Or in India is 130, every house they are using a AC machines or luxuries, everybody they are maintaining the luxury. That is why water requirement is also, because government or they may not collect the water, they collect a nominal water. This is the situation, the requirement, water requirements. One thing remember, water requirements of water for people is required. At the same time, the irrigation requirement of water is also the predominant factors in the case of the water resource management. Next, coming to the domestic water requirements. If you see, the population is rapidly increases. If you see in the city, suppose if 50,000 people are required 25 million liters per day they required. If you take all of you see the statistics of if you take a city, how much the requirement, or if you take a town, how much the requirement, or if you take in a small village a 500 inhabitants, how much the water, only for 500 people living on that area, 25,000 liters per day is required. So this is the statistics. So that means how much the significant demand, water demand. That is why there is a need to construct the dams, to construct the reservoirs. They are called as a long-term structures, and not only for long-term structures, you have to go for a short-term the structures also. So you have to know, just as a civil engineer, you have to know what type of the structures you have to discuss in the coming the topics. Just to see in the coming to the history of the dams. So what is dam? Dam is nothing but a structure constructed across the river. What is the main important the purpose of the dam? To store the water. It is nothing but the storage, the structure. So different types of dams are there based on the materials, based on the hydraulic designs, overflow dam and non-overflow dam, or based on the materials you can classify it like a gravity dams or earthen dams, like different types of materials they classify in different way. But whereas here, so what is the main the function of dam? To store the water. You just see the diagram of the dam. And next, just at a glance, you see the dams of the today. How many number of dams are available in overall in the country wise as well as in the world wise. And next, number of dams you see in the bar chart. How many number of dams, their heights, the details of dimensions of the dams are available in the case of the bar chart. And you see world wise, so the importance of the dams in overall the world, you see in the bar chart you represent different developed countries, how much the Asian countries, African countries, as well as in the case of developed countries, how far the distribution of the large dams. So, that means based on the population, so everybody they construct the structure. Our India now they are constructing a number of dams, and in particularly if you take Andhra Pradesh, they are concentrating more the structures to conserve the water like a Polavaram. What will happen without dams? At present the major problem we are facing the surplus water, otherwise the scarcity of water. So, what will happen? So, whatever the floods that means surplus water will come, and that too they may not get the water regarding to according to the monsoon period. Suddenly the water will come, the floods will come. So, what will happen? The entire during the flood, all the water they go and joining into the sea. Once if water is joining into the sea, that water is not at all utilized for drinking or as well as in the agriculture purpose. That is why you have to conserve the water. So, to conserve, actually you see our the ex-president of India, Abdul Kalam, is proposed one main idea like linking of rivers. During these floods, once water will come from one river to the another river, instead of going to joining to the sea, instead of joining to the sea, why can't you link that water, surplus water, you have to joining to the other river, that people, the surrounding area of the people will benefited, but they send the proposal, the cost of the linking of irrigation projects are very high if you compare with the these benefits. So, that is why it is not possible you start within the states, but while starting this linking of refunds, that means cooperation between the states is very, very important. That is why you see nowadays, while if you want to construct any dam, you have to consider so many factors. So, every dam or any structure if you want to construct, you have to take some clearance from Central Water Commission or the Environmental Board. Without approval of Central Water Commission as well as Environmental Board, the government may not sanction the structure. So, that is a major problem. You see overall the statistics of the dams and then dimensions as well as number of dams and importance of dams. Now, you see in the case of in the previous slide, you had to discuss in detail about overall the importance of dams. Now, you see the application of the dams. So, once if you construct a dam, so what purpose? To store the water, and for the storage of water it is useful for domestic purpose, and one more thing is agriculture purpose and industrial purpose, because here in the developed countries like in India, the major point, two important the problems, like one is the population growth. You have to satisfy the drinking water the requirement. Another one is the more than 70 to 80% of the people are depending on agriculture sector. So, you have to satisfy the requirement of the agriculture point of view also. So, that is why, so the dam, if you construct the dam, they satisfy the needs of the people living on that area, and one way you have to satisfy the needs of the farmers, because the farmers without the water there is no the food grains, and there is no food, there is no development in the country also. So, that is why this is a domestic wise is very, very important. At the same time, the agriculture, and one more is the industrial, the sector, and one more is the flood control. You see, in the coming topic, overall at a glance, you see domestic as well as agriculture, flood control, hydropower, inland navigation, and one more thing, once if we construct any structure, whether it is a dam or reservoir, so recreation is also the in that area is and that recreation is for people, they will generate some the financial benefit also. So, that is why, so these are the main important the benefits received from the dams. So, you see in the coming slides one by one you have to see to know how much the benefit from the dam. And here in the diagram you see domestic water supply. In the domestic water supply, you know, whatever without water, it is not at all possible to survive in the nature. For anything, for domestic wise, water is required. So, water is a very, very important, like in the case of in the domestic the wise people, that means for luxuries, already I given for a person per day is required 135. If you see in the 50 liters, they required how much water, and gradually the water requirement per a person per day is increases, and it is increases 135 liters. Again the statistics based on the World Health Organization and they are calculated the requirements of water is increases like 200 liters per day, where so that means such a huge quantity of water we have to required in the case of developed country, developing country like in India. So, it is not responsibility of only the government people, it is the responsibility of every people to conserve the water, to effective utilizing the water. That is why the government is also, they are implementing so many techniques for the agriculture, not only for conventional methods, they are using for non-conventional methods like micro irrigation also. Next, so in this is the industrial water supply. For any industry, so water is a vital role. You just see at a glance, if you each industry, for cement industry or steel industry or whatever may be the industry, without water it is not possible. So, that is why the water is a vital role. That is why in the beginning slide I explained, for a sustainable civilization or for sustainable development is a water is very, very important. So, in the last one you see domestic, how much is the requirement, and next industrial, how we can supply the water. You have to store the water, because we are not having the uniform equal rainfall, uneven rainfall is there. You have to store the water, you have to conserve the water. Without conservation or without storage of water, it is not possible to supply water based on the requirement, like based on the requirement of industry and based on the requirement of the domestic or supply of water. You see, nowadays in all the areas, water may not the supply uniformly, like each divide the different timings, and the people everywhere they are required more water. So, that is why in the, this is the one important one, industrial the sector. The next topic is an irrigation. So, this is one of the important the application of the dam. What is irrigation? Irrigation is nothing but a artificial supply of water to the soil for plant growth. So, artificial supply, when there is need of the artificial, whenever the natural source is not sufficient, then only you can go for a artificial, because artificial supply means because we are facing the problem with uneven rainfall, less rainfall. Suppose if you want to go for a commercial crops, you need the extra water. So, that is why some crops, like one thing remember in the irrigation, different types of irrigations are there, or in the systems of irrigation like flow irrigation and lift irrigation is there, and flow means by gravity the water will flow, as well as in the lift irrigation by applying some external source the water will flow. And at the same time, if you know the mode of application of water to the different the crops, different the methods are there, like surface. You see in the diagram, you see the methods of irrigation, agriculture point of view, like some surface methods are there, some surface subsurface methods are there, and some the micro irrigation methods are there. So, how we can satisfy, because surface as well as subsurface. In the case of surface irrigation by gravity, so because the motor, that means these are all the, in the diagram you see, it is in a conventional method. So, in the conventional method more water will apply and there is a chance of losses are more, and whereas if you go nowadays government is insisting, they encouraging everybody, they go for a micro irrigation like drip irrigation or the sprinkler irrigation. So, based on by applying this sprinkler and drip to effective utilization of the water. So, that is why irrigation is a major role in the case of in a developed country like in India. Next, flood control. While if you construct the dams, what is the one more important application to control the flood during the flood season? The whatever the water, flood water, instead of diverting the water into the sea and to directed and to divert that water into the dam and to store the water in one way, so to prevent the damages from the flood. You see in the diagram, in the flooding area of the Africa and flooding area in the Europe, like how much the problems they are facing in the flood. You see nowadays everywhere this is the flood problem. So, like cyclone is one way and another way is the flood. So, what is the difference between cyclone and flood? The continuous rainfall is nothing but a cyclone, and at a time within a short period the intensity of rainfall is more and it is fall in a particular area, it is nothing but a flood. So, what will happen? The entire flood, it may go and joining into the sea. That sea water is not useful for drinking or any purpose. That is why there is a need of the structure, the dam. The dam is a long term harvesting the structure. So, flood control is also one important the application of the dam. And you see different places how the dam is a important vital role to conserve the water. And next, coming to the purpose of dam is nothing but a hydropower. If you want to generate a power, so that means you require a water. So, hydropower means hydroelectric power plant. What is hydroelectric power plant? Hydraulic energy is converted into mechanical energy and mechanical energy is converted into electrical energy. You see in different areas, like in the case of different power generations are there, conventional sources are there and non-conventional sources are there, and hydroelectric power plant. If you see in our area like Sri Salem power plant is there, left canal is there and right canal is there. Left canal is under Telangana state as well as right canal is under Andhra Pradesh, and the Sri Salem. So, the capacity of that Sri Salem dam is 875 or 880, and due to these floods already it reaches. So, immediately both the states Telangana as well as Andhra Pradesh state they started the generation. So, if you construct a dam across a reservoir and then based on storage of water and then to divert the water and then you can generate the power. So, hydropower generation is also very important the application of dam. Next, inland navigation. In the olden days, so these dams also used for the navigation purpose also. Next, you see dams and the environment. So, once if you store the water, automatically the environmental wise also the increase. That is why I am telling. So, in the sustainable development, we have to protect our environment. The environmental protection, community development, economical development. Once if water is available and then based on that the environmental is also increases. That is why every year the government of India in the world wise to create awareness, they are conducting World Water Day, and create awareness, they are conducting World Environmental the Day. So, these 2 days every people they get an idea, awareness. It is not the responsibility of only one government people, it is the responsibility of everybody to conserve the water at the same time to protect the environment. And you see another slide like environment and the conservation. So, in the case of dams, in the future, in the looking to the future, so what are the main, there is a need of irrigation the projects, water resource projects, and like you see there is a need like by construction of all these the dams, so automatically you see like resettlement and recreation, and at the same time socio-economical impacts, next environmental impacts, sedimentation issues. So, that means for everything public involvement as well as this coordination is very important. So, that is why, so up to now we have to know the long term structure like a dam is required to satisfy all the requirements. So, by increasing the use of, so that means if you go instead of the dam's long term structures, if you go in integrated way, in the integrated water management in the case of watershed. Actually, in the first I given my topic, the studies on watershed management, a case study. So, on the topics you have to know all the outline the topics. So, because you what is the status of the old water, and at the same time you had to know hydrological cycle. Next afterwards you have to know the importance of the long term harvesting structures. Then afterwards not only the long term harvesting structures, and if you want to construct a large structure in a particular area, it is not possible because you have to invest more amount and you have to occupy more area. If you consider some factors, any project or irrigation project, if you want to construct, you have to consider some factors. Availability of land is important, availability of water is important, and next material availability is important, and clearance from environment is important, and clearance from Central Water Commission is important. So, if you consider all these factors, it is not possible to construct one a dam in a particular area. So, that is why there is a need of immediate the short term structures, and that is why in some areas in Rayalaseema, Kadapa district is in a drought prone area, like in the Rayalaseema, Anantapur or Kadapa, these are all the drought prone areas. That is why, so I taken this topic like these studies on integrated watershed management. So, in the integrated watershed, what is integrated? You have to go for the multidimensional, multidisciplinary aspect you have to involve to improve the water resources. So, that is why at a glance you see the involvement of the people is very the important, and integrated way if you go for management of water, then automatically the water resources are the improved. So, finally, I thank all the students for your cooperation and for your constant listening for my lecture. Thank you.